This was not anticipated by anyone. The quiet part was finally said aloud by the Indiana Fever president, who was sat at the top of the entire organization. Her remarks raised eyebrows and stirred up the entire basketball music community. For the first time, the realities of that franchise, music, politics, pressure, locker room dynamics, and the struggle between creating a champion and a brand were exposed. Everything you believe to be true about Caitlin Clark's circumstances in Indiana is altered once you learn the full story. Let's now return to the start of this tale. Indiana was one of the least well-known teams in professional basketball prior to Caitlin Clark ever donning a Hoosier uniform. 6 victories in 2021, 5 in 2022, and 13 in 2023 are being discussed. They were a joke for almost 10 years. No spotlight, no buzz, no fans. There wouldn't be any cameras. The chairs weren't being filled. Whatever the fever had been, the WNBA scene had drastically shifted. That was the truth. A once proud franchise was neglected. But despite their best efforts, nobody in that front office could have anticipated what transpired. When the first overall pick in the 2024 WNBA draft entered the room, everything changed. Caitlin Clark not only lowered the temperature but also altered the league as a whole. Everywhere she performed, the crowds were completely sold out. A media frenzy that, to be honest, had never been witnessed in women's basketball since music, record-breaking TV ratings, and jerseys flying off the racks. The company had to make a decision in the midst of that eruption. Would they attempt to change the direction of the wave or ride it? At that moment, the entire tale becomes fascinating because the front office made a move that stunned many people, and the Fever needed someone at the top who realized exactly what they had, a once-in-a-generation athlete who was single-handedly altering what was possible for women's sports. Kelly Krauskopf was appointed as their new president of business operations and basketball. It made sense on paper. Krauskopf had previously created the Fever, was a member of the team that won the 2012 championship, and had first-hand knowledge of the organization. The group introduced her with all the excitement that was expected. However, something in the rhetoric of her first news conference brought up difficulties that many at the time chose to ignore, but that would later come back to destroy the entire company months later. No one noticed the warning signs until it was too late since they were concealed in plain sight. At this time, everything fell apart. July of 2025. Caitlin Clark's injury-related absence is causing problems for the Fever. Due to a groin problem that has been plaguing her for weeks, Clark has only participated in 11 games this season. Fans are irritated. The team is on the verge of making it to the postseason. The pressure is increasing. On the same day that the video from Krauskopf's first press conference inexplicably resurfaces on social media, the internet unearths a speech from October 2024 that most people had completely missed. During the press conference, Krauskopf looked directly into the cameras and declared, "This is about the Indiana Fever. Indeed, Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston are our key players, and we plan to keep growing them. However, I want our team to become a national leader and a lasting brand, like Apple or something similar." 5 words, like an apple. That was all that was required. Because not many people heard that vision in that cue. In just a few hours, the video went viral, and its fan base quickly expanded. It served as a caution. In the Fever front office, such a response was unheard of. Fans were not just angry but also well-organized, boisterous, and hard to ignore. Because of what Apple actually accomplished, the comparison to Apple struck a different chord. One visionary, Steve Jobs, was the foundation of their entire identity, and when he left, the company all but fell apart. Therefore, the Fever. President's use of the similar analogy seemed revealing to Clark supporters, as if the organization already viewed Clark as a component rather than the primary emphasis. A fan responded to enduring brands that align with their values on social media. Steve Jobs, the company's star and visionary, is credited with making Apple a global icon. Another fan didn't hold back either. When Clark finally decides she's had enough of the front office skip fire, the Fever will acknowledge that they wasted the greatest potential in women's sports ever. The answers, comment sections, and message boards all expressed the same basic sentiment. You don't minimize the most significant person this team has ever had, and you keep focusing on her. The system wasn't just noise, according to the criticism. A few hours after the video went viral, Krauskopf's whole account, which had only been active on social media a few days prior, vanished. Someone in that organization made the decision, and they were aware of how dire things were becoming. There was quiet in place of a message or an explanation. The players on the court, the ones who actually suit up next to Caitlin Clark every night, were telling a totally different and far more truthful story while the front staff was being demonized online. This is where things become even more difficult. When Lexi Hull, one of Clark's closest friends, applied for a story in Glamour magazine, she had nothing. Although virtually no one in a Fever uniform had previously been willing to reveal, Hull said that everyone in the league already knew. Because of the media attention and the people who have supported us since Caitlin arrived, I believe there is some jealousy over the Fever. She went one step further and disclosed that teams from all over the league had been publicly discussing things like, "We can't let the Fever win," in their own locker rooms. A disturbing reality that had been developing for 2 seasons was revealed by Hull's remarks. These days, the Fever do more than simply play hoops. Every time they play, opposing teams target them because of a single member of their team rather than the team's performance as a whole. Sophie Cunningham went one step farther. The player who established herself as Clark's enforcer on the floor and made it obvious early on that taking cheap shots at her teammate would have consequences had already come forward and confirmed what the entire league had been speculating about. Aaliyah Cunningham claimed to have heard it prior to traveling to Indiana. She claimed that there were open discussions about Clark in the locker room while she was still in Phoenix and that competitors weren't only trying to win. They were attempting to make their point. Music. The story of Clark being physically targeted and receiving an unending welcome to the W moment has been chronicled throughout the season. Even objective onlookers were shocked by the intensity of the hard play directed at Clark by the time her groin injury ended her season after just 13 games, and many were seriously questioning whether the referees had adequately protected her. A growing percentage of people who were listening carefully said that the answer was no. However, the inside story of what it's truly like to be Caitlin Clark's co-worker was beginning to emerge as all of this was happening in the public eye. Thus, it was only the start. It was likewise not what the critics had anticipated. The most common narrative advanced by Caitlin Clark's detractors was that she caused issues in the lavatory. The players disliked her, believing that no team could survive the divisions caused by the attention and fame. In a September 2024 podcast, Hall of Famer Cheryl Swoops claimed that important Fever players were subtly expressing their disinterest in attending and that the circumstances around Clark were too much for them to handle. It spread quickly. The music was playing all over the place, or the Fever became part of the background talk as they approached their second season together. Unless, of course, Clark felt obliged to appear as a guest on another March Madness program hosted by Subbard and Diana Taurasi. Faced it head-on. She wasn't upset. She didn't act defensively. She was remarkably composed about it. In essence, you grow accustomed to others believing they know what goes on behind closed doors when, in fact, they don't. Music. She continued to receive encouragement from her co-workers in that locker area. During the 2025 playoffs, Clark's teammates flooded the floor once she recovered from her injuries. They ended her interview after the game. They unexpectedly appeared for her. There was a huge celebration in the locker room when the Fever won the Commissioner Cup. When players bonded, it didn't read like a show. Smiling and really joyful for one another. The media hasn't yet assembled this. Whether or if Caitlin Clark's teammates liked her was never the main subject of the Fever narrative. It concerned whether the front office, which was in charge of them all, was prepared to surround her with the required parts and give the project their whole focus. Aaliyah's ties at the court level were genuine, which explains the disparity. Music. Clark and Boston were good friends. Lexi Hull was wary. Before they had even played a game together, Sophie Cunningham and other new players were swooning over Clark. The rookie who made the final roster, Michaela Timpson, respected Clark in a way that is difficult to duplicate. Following the expansion draft, Clark posted messages on Instagram for 2 of her teammates. "Cub, I love you," for Christy Wallace, and "My Aussie for life," for Chloe BB Way. The love was sincere. These were genuine connections. However, winning titles requires more than just contacts. And at the center of it all was that tension. In addition to the Apple sound clip, Kelly Krauskopf's remarks at the October 2024 press conference included something that many people overlooked in their haste to express their disapproval. Krauskopf was referring to the long game when she said that she wanted the Fever to be a lasting brand. When Indiana won its lone championship in 2012, Caitlin Clark was 10 years old. She added that sometimes it takes a generation to go to the next level. Perhaps the Fever president, who was sat at the top of the entire organization. Her remarks raised eyebrows and stirred up the entire basketball music community. For the first time, the realities of that franchise, music, politics, pressure, locker room dynamics, and the struggle between creating a champion and a brand were exposed. Everything you believe to be true about Caitlin Clark's circumstances in Indiana is altered once you learn the full story. Let's now return to the start of this tale. Indiana was one of the least well-known teams in professional basketball prior to Caitlin Clark ever donning a Hoosier uniform. 6 victories in 2021, 5 in 2022, and 13 in 2023 are being discussed. They were a joke for almost 10 years. No spotlight, no buzz, no fans. There wouldn't be any cameras. The chairs weren't being filled. Whatever the fever had been, the WNBA scene had drastically shifted. That was the truth. A once proud franchise was neglected. But despite their best efforts, nobody in that front office could have anticipated what transpired. When the first overall pick in the 2024 WNBA draft entered the room, everything changed. Caitlin Clark not only lowered the temperature but also altered the league as a whole. Everywhere she performed, the crowds were completely sold out. A media frenzy that, to be honest, had never been witnessed in women's basketball since music, record-breaking TV ratings, and jerseys flying off the racks. The company had to make a decision in the midst of that eruption.